All right, everyone. Welcome. I am going to be kicking us off. It's going to be a little different tonight. So if you're just coming in, we might still have some ladies trickling in because goodness knows May is crazy. But we're also going to do tonight a little different because we are without our worship leader. Poor Elion texted me this morning like, I'm so sorry, but I do not have a single voice to give you. We tried to find someone else, and it's May. So guess what we're going to do tonight? We're going to do karaoke style. So when we get to worship, we're still going to do a little bit, but we're going to do it karaoke, okay? But instead of starting with our song, I'm going to start us off by just giving a few announcements to kick us off. If you don't know me, my name is Crystal Olig. I help to lead women's ministry here with a lot of ladies that you're going to get to meet in a minute, which literally I think means half of you are going to come up here, which is perfect, because we want to thank our volunteers tonight. So all of you are super important to our ministry, and I'm so just proud. This is my second year kind of helping lead the ministry, and I'm just so proud that we made it through another year, and we did some really good things. We brought new women in, so we're going to celebrate that tonight. So I have just a couple announcements, one from the Bible study group. So our Bible study group that meets on Tuesday evenings is actually going to start one more study. So you can always just hop into a study. They're going to start it on May 9th, and it's just 7 sessions, so like a great lightweight one. If maybe life slows down a little bit for you in the summer, it'd be a great one to jump in with this woman, Lisa Harper, and they're going to go through her book, How Much More. So that one is going to be really fun. The other Bible study group is going to finish out this month and then take a break in the summer too. So if you've Bible studies or something you want to still think about doing for next year, it could look totally different, but those are steady Bible studies, so still a good chance to hop into that one. And then next, I'm actually really excited to announce this one because this is by popular request. We are actually going to have a joint adult ministry event here at our campus and have a patio night like we've done for women's ministry in the past. But I've spoken with Men of Hope, and they're going to actually cook for us. So that seems great. And we're going to grill out. And it is not a couples event. It is a casual community time just for adults, for men's and women's ministry. So if you're not in a couple, that is totally fine. And we're just going to do like a really light, like kind of community activity, grill out, and enjoy some fellowship time on the back patio. So mark your calendars for June 29th. We usually try to do 2 patio nights sometime in the summer. I don't have the later summer date because we kind of usually skip July because how much a lot of you help with VBS. Maybe early August we may try to do another one, but I don't have that date yet. So that's really all we have to wrap up our really formal announcements. Of course, pay attention through the summer because especially with VBS ramping up and school ramping down and graduations and faith statement night, it is just a busy time in our campus, so there's always extra needs and requests, so I know the staff always really appreciates when we're able to all get together. Ladies in the atrium, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to come in here because it's going to be your turn next. And if there are any more ladies that come at this point, I'm just going to holler at them here. And also just because you're so cute and I want you to see yourself in the pictures. So up next, up next for a couple of you, I just want to give a quick recap of some of the things that we did this year. Women's Ministry Year in Review. And you could go ahead, go to the next slide. I forgot the clicker again. Why do I keep doing that, Max? Anyway, the year in review, I just kind of put together, we did 3 Bible studies or Bible study small groups for women. We had our annual retreat, which was, I don't pick favorites, but if I did pick favorite, I thought the annual retreat was one of my favorite events of the year just because we did it differently. We had an amazing turnout. It was really well organized, and it was just great. But maybe one of you has a different favorite. We did our puzzle night here just not that long ago. I don't know here if you saw the puzzle that we did. I was told that it was very difficult, which was sort of the point, but also when no one was halfway done, halfway through, we had to do an audible, and so groups of 2 became groups of 4 with their table mates, and it was really fun because we got to get to know each other better through that as well, so that was fun. And of course, some of you may have come to the Priscilla Schreier live stream we did. We have our awesome journals that we did, and that kind of help support our ministry. And we continued things that maybe you guys don't know, but pretty much women's ministry carries, sometimes with some help from youth ministry too for breakfast this year. But we do those things, and we sometimes come along care needs, things pop up in our community. We call out, we do meal trains, we do things like that. And even just for me, even as kind of just keeping things going was starting the year with a survey of what you guys actually want and need and what you care about and want to be part of, and keeping that organized. And hopefully sometimes my weekly or my monthly newsletters amused you, didn't make you think I was crazy, weekend like filled your heart just a little bit. And then you even tried like a couple fun things like our winter walking group. So yeah, like I can see some of you here and here. And so our sweater night, our sweater contest. And you know, there's other really important things that like didn't fit on a slide. Like we helped one of our sisters get through a potential cancer diagnosis, right? And like prayed for her and she came through that, right? And we got to experience God's power all through that. So I just think, you know, things like that. There were women, you know, in our community that were really struggling with their health, the health of their children, and they needed extra support. And so we were able to come alongside them. We were able to pray and do our, you know, text calls for prayer and, you know, the note cards that we do where we were able to pray. And like every single month, Catherine would help gather those things up, send those out to our prayer team and to our pastoral team, and just make sure that the women in our ministry were covered in prayer. And like that's something that we have a goal to be able to do across our campus, because that's what being part of community means, is like you can bring your hard stuff to your community, your faith community, and know that it's, you know, in their hands and God's hands that you're covered. So I just think those are all really things. So can we give ourselves a round of applause, please, for all those awesome things. I feel like those are just really important, and you know, we're so glad that we, you know, we're able to follow God's heart for what we wanted to get done this year. So thank you for being part of it. So that's really exciting. And next up, I want to thank our women's ministry volunteers. As we do that, though, one word of warning: so many of you like just jump in and help wherever, and I never ever want to hurt anyone's feelings. So I did make a list, but if you were missed, we're so sorry. And I also just want to say, like, for those of you that respond at the last minute for things like, oh no, we need greeters, and oh my gosh, we need someone to sing at the last minute, like, we're so thankful for however you serve, because you know, you're all really special. So we have these really fun little tumblers, but what I think is fun about them is not the fact they're like actually kind of nice, like they were something I thought we would all like, and you can use at church and hot or cold or whatever. But in the back, I wanted to do something that was personal for our volunteers that helped you connect to, you know, whatever this year meant to you or what your faith journey has looked like this year. So in the back, I wanted to not, you know, make sure you had time to look through them. There are all 100 different stickers with 100 different Bible verses on them. So go grab one or two or three and stick them on your cup as a memory of this year, something that was like special and important to you. So for all of you volunteers, but I'll call you up individually. So Christine Megason, and we may applaud, just like it's fine. It's fine. And Tiffany Hamill. I would say Christine and Tiffany are like my rocks in terms of the gathering and social media. Please go down to the end and stand. Thank you. And Tiffany for doing all of our social media work and making sure that we have lots of things. And they're always so cute. And we started our Instagram this year, and it was just so great. Liz, where's Liz? Liz is such a sunny, smiley face doing greeting. Sometimes, you know, eating while she's coming up here. Yeah, exactly. I thought so. And I know not everyone could be here tonight, but and Jessica McGinnis, I know, is not here. Jamie Schutte, who helps a lot of things, including breakfast and Hope Kids and women's ministry. Like pretty much she does everything. And I know a lot of you serve in a lot of ways, so thank you, Jamie. See who else we've got here. And let's see, I know Catherine, and I don't think Catherine or Laura aren't here that help with the greeting. And like I said, Catherine helps with prayer ministry. Sarah Bridie's not here, right? Did not see her. Is Becky here? Becky Landels? No Becky? Okay, Becky did a lot of our food this year, which was really helpful and fun. Jean Jansen that helps run breakfast. I know they had a concert at my kid's elementary where she works, and I know she's at that tonight. Is Sherry Folkert's here? Also helps with food and breakfast? No, I know, it's one of those nights. And Joyce Gardner, I didn't see Joyce. Audrey Volker, didn't see Audrey. And I knew Julie and Karen, who are actually our two Bible study leads, were not able to come as well. Tyra's not here, right? No Tyra. And Tyra started, I'll tell you the fun story about Tyra. About the beginning of the year, she just came up to me and she said, you know, I have this heart to start a small group for women who are like launching kids into the world in the next couple of years. And so it was just really organic and something she felt God was calling her to do. And she's like, I'm really not sure if it's a Bible study or book study or a small group, what it is, but I want to do it. Could we put it out and see how many women are interested in it? And they've been meeting, and hopefully they were blessed by it and their kiddos were blessed by it. So, you know, I love just when God moves everyone in our community to do those things. Katie Stratman. Katie did the retreat this year and was just amazing. Kept me organized, and I mean the retreat was it was so fun with all the fun things that we did, and so that was really awesome. As well as Chanel, who moved, but I have a cup for her. I got her mailing address, and Nicole Green also helped a ton with that. And then I also let's see, Gloria and Denise. I saw Denise. Denise is here. Where's Denise? I thought I saw her. There you are. You helped. You're on my list. So I don't know. I think somebody put you on my list. So, because we're trying. Well, you didn't Bible studies. Yeah, that's right. Okay. And then, let's see. Nico. I miss Nico. Where's Nico? You're here. Yes, thank you. Like, my goodness. So literally, when I said, tonight is a busy night, you can tell by all those women who are typically helping with things. Thank you. So I will be, for the rest of them, so spread the word in case, I'll send out an email too, but I'll leave them with the team in the office so that ladies can pick that up and get their notes and stuff from all of us. So, and then with that, not last but absolutely not least, I would like to call up our fabulous production team. So, sorry, Max, but you're going to have to come up here. So I don't know if you guys know Zoe and Max very well, but, Zoe is a student. She's a sophomore, even though every year I ask her if she's graduating. Because she is so cool and mature, and also has such a great and fun heart for what we do, and super talented in all the buttons, and obviously Max is on our staff and just super awesome. So we're so grateful because otherwise, literally, I'll never do this. And he's actually really calming. Cool, Crystal, you got this, and I need to hear that 90% of the time. So thank you all so much. We're so grateful for you and how you serve our community. We appreciate you. So don't forget to get your stickers when you go out, so you can go back to your seats. I didn't give Christine a cup. You get one, though. I promise. That's great. All right, so I have, instead of an icebreaker tonight, we thought we, again, just do stuff a little bit different. So I'm going to need you to take out your phones for this very next part. Hopefully some of you have done this before, but if you haven't, I'll give a little explanation. You can go ahead to the next slide. So if anyone has done Menti before, do we know about Menti? Most of you hopefully do. Okay, so use your phone and try to scan this QR code. I really hope this is going to work. We've never done this like this before. So hopefully it'll at least work for the majority of you. So it's like a little game kind of on your phone. So I'm going to give everybody a minute. And so we really only just have 2 questions in there, because what I wanted to do was first reflect back on the year, and we set out with this intention to talk about things that we thought would be important to you and fill your hearts up. And so we want to get a little bit of feedback, because that's going to help us. So the first question is kind of around, all of the different topics and themes that we had for the year. And be able to kind of just tell us which ones you really enjoyed, because we'd love to get that feedback. And the next question is more to help us with topics that we could talk about in the future. So as we plan for next year and what themes and messages we might have. So I'll give you a minute to do that. But if you want to switch to the live for a second, Max, that will, or Zoe, yes, it is live already. Oh, it's live already. See, it's different back there. See, isn't that cool? I love that I get the immediacy effect of this very cool favorite topic of the year. So it's just fun to see. I'll give everybody a minute. I'm glad I don't have to vote, because and you won't hurt my feelings if you don't vote for me, because you've not actually heard it yet. So it's fine. Does it let you vote for more than one? Because I was unclear when I set it up. It's okay. It's okay. I wish I had a ranking, but I don't. But that's good. That's good to know. It's good to know what resonated with everybody. All right, we can go on to the next one then. Hopefully it lets you. This was new. We weren't sure how it was going to work. Do you guys have the second question? Does it give you one yet? Okay, let's see if it works. And if not, we'll call an audible and we'll do it again at the end, and I'll go back and fix it on my computer. Oh, okay. Can you? It won't advance for you guys? I might have to go back and click something on my computer. It's all right. Give it another second. Okay. I don't think I can do it without going back and getting my computer to maybe go mess with it. So let's do this. We will try to come back to it at the end of my message. I'll mess with it while we're doing our fun sing-along that we're going to get to have. So we'll do that later because I do really want the input more than anything else. It's important that we get that from everybody. I'll probably end up including it in like some sort of survey too, as well as we send stuff out at the end of the year. So it's great to get your feedback and kind of like a fun little quick survey quiz thing. So thank you for that. I think with that, we're going to try to do karaoke. How do we feel about this? Do we feel pumped? I mean, I think we can do it. All right, I'm doing this in the right order, right, Christine? We had to change a lot tonight. Okay, perfect. So let's try it. Max is most certainly going to turn off my mic because none of us want that. But we will get to sing, and I'll come down and sing with you all. That was great. Thank you for playing along. I hope that was kind of fun. I had fun doing it. I really challenge any one of you to pick one of the songs the next time you're out to sing karaoke, though. I think you'll surprise everyone. Just a little bit. So we did get our Menti working. So I want to get your phones out again. Let's give it a shot. And don't forget, now Christine and Tiffany, I messed you up. You can't vote now. Okay. So let's give it a shot and let's see if it works this time again. So we know how it's going to work. So, did it give you the next question? So we put some topics down there, again, just because we really like the idea that we're kind of leaning into what you really need to hear, right? So, the topics that we picked before, I wanted to think of like what are a couple other ones that might fall along, similar lines. And again, it's one thing that we try to work as a ministry team to do throughout the summer to like look at what it was. I really did think you could pick more than one, so sorry if you have like 100 options in one choice. Like I said, we'll probably send it out as a survey again later, so this is just a fun way to get live things. So like some of the topics here are like around mental health and family conflict, money issues, or faith at work. I love this one. I went back to a list you guys might have remembered from the first topic. We kind of talked about all the things women worry about, and too much stuff was on there. And I was like, I don't know if that's my greatest spiritual problem, but it is certainly a problem. So I raised hands. Oh, I love this one. See, it's very clear. Like we have some winners here around raising kids and like finding our purpose, right? Okay, see, this is great. Thank you for your input. I'm glad that it actually worked. So we will use some of this, like I said, for our planning for next year. So it's nice to always hear from everybody. All right, and Tiffany, I can invite you up. Can you run around for Tiffany doing our social media and communications all year? Because she really does do an amazing job. And she does it like for work too. And so I always appreciate when women just not only lean into what they have to do all day, every day, and still do it for us too. So that's wonderful.
I'm on? Is that better? Okay. Well, I was going to say, I wanted to have us give Crystal a round of applause because she has led us fearlessly, faithfully this year. And so it's my pleasure. Gosh, I'm going to get choked up. So I'm sorry. It's my pleasure to be able to pray for you tonight and the message that you're about to hear from Crystal as we wrap up our series here, Real Faith for Real Life. And it's about friendship, and it's just not lost on me that I get to do this for you, friend.
It is. So, we didn't even plan it that way. We didn't plan it.
We didn't, but will you guys bow your heads and join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, wow, just let's pray, give you praise and thanks tonight for the women that are here, the friends, the sisters, those that are not here, that couldn't be with us tonight, that have been here with us throughout seasons of our lives. And let us just celebrate what we have in those. And Lord, we celebrate what we've had in a season of women's ministry and all the things that you're doing in our community. And you are just so good. And so tonight we get to celebrate and we get to just soak in friendships and sisterhood and So tonight, Lord, I just lift Crystal up, and I just ask that the Holy Spirit pour out through her to all of us as we just absorb this message and really reflect on what friendship looks like in all seasons of our life and in all facets of our life, for that matter, whether it be at home, whether it be in your neighborhood, at work, in your church community. Friendship is paramount, and we just know that we need that sisterhood of friends to be with us in all seasons and stages. And so, Lord, just let Crystal be that vessel for us this evening. And as we apply that, as we walk out of here in our faith, in our real life. And Lord, I thank you. And as that song we just listened to, let us be a little more like you, Jesus, in all that we do in our friendships and beyond that. So it is in your name that we pray. Amen.
That was so nice. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that was going to happen, so I'm all teary and choked up. We're funny. We are funny. All right, so like Tiffany said, I get the pleasure of talking to you tonight just a little bit more about kind of the year. Do we have slides, maybe? Oh, I have a clicker. I told you I was going to forget, Max, multiple times, and twice I already have. There we go. So if some of you remember, we actually have this inside of our journals that we did this year. This was the verse that we started the year with, that we kind of anchored our theme to from James. And it just says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy, for you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." And so, the reason we anchored to that is it really spoke to us when we were planning that we are going to go through struggles. The Bible is very clear that we will go through struggles. And so that's one of the reasons we anchored to this idea of real faith for real life. And, with the goal of at the end, maybe at the end of the ministry year, that we just feel a little bit more perfect and complete, just really reflecting on the fact that God has shown up where we've needed him in those moments and in those really hard topics, some of which we talked about this year. And that's, kind of why we chose that and why we talked about that this year. So, and I've talked to you guys all about, this is now officially the third time I've delivered a message ever in my life. And I speak a lot at work, but I always tell you guys, I am no different than the rest of you in terms of trying to find myself through the struggles that I've had throughout the year. And always at the end of the year, last year was the same for me, where I tried to reflect back, not just on how kind of the ministry has grown, but how I saw God moving in my life through just being part of the ministry, being part of some of your stories and hearing what you've gone through too. And, the thing that that really resonated, I think, at the beginning is that, we picked this idea of realness. And I admittedly had to go back to the video of my own talk to remember what I said in August. Or early September, what have you, about authenticity. And I thought, how cool is it that we are ending this year? And so the reason we picked this theme for the end of the year is a couple of reasons. Because, we wanted to talk about authenticity. We wanted to make sure that, that we are not scared in church to talk about the really hard things we're going through, but that we bring you that biblical lens. And so we talked about being authentic. And then about in the middle of the year, those of you that came to the panel night, one of the questions that we asked the ladies at the panel night was, what do we think keeps women from being their real and authentic selves and being, honest with their struggles and letting people and God into your struggles? And one of the answers that we got, that it was funny because I remember I was sitting here, I was looking at the rest of the women, and more than one of the 5 speakers that we had, they said, it's fear of judgment. It's fear of judgment by someone else, but especially other women, because we can be really hard on ourselves and we can be really hard on each other if we're not careful. And so when I thought about what is keeping us from being perfect and complete and what is keeping us, from being real, that was kind of where I landed. And so, we're going to talk just a little bit about what does the Bible say about judgment. And what's important to me about this topic is not just knowing what that thing is and identifying it and naming it, but also that we talk about why it's so important that we don't do it, because I really believe it's one of those things. The women said it is one of the things that keeps us from living our authentic selves and all the things that we do. And I think when we can't do that, it also makes it really hard to live in community with each other in the way that God intended. And so I think those are the things that we're going to be talking about a little bit tonight. And I go back to this idea, that when we are going to talk later about women and friendships in the Bible, we get to see real women even in the Bible, even though there's very little, thank you, patriarchy, about women in the Bible. We still have just enough to tell us how God intended us to live too. And so I think that's really important. But I also went back, to this quote, and if you were here at the beginning of the year, we played this from a podcast between Glennon Doyle and Jen Hatmaker. And so Jen Hatmaker in the context of this podcast is talking about she went through a divorce. And so she's just talking about why it was really hard to admit even to her dearest, closest friends that she was really struggling in her marriage. And so that Glennon asks her, so would you share with me and then tell me why do we do this? Why do we leave each other alone or feel alone in our struggles? And Jen answers back, and I'll just read the quote back. Jen says, why? Why do we? Because we're so good at getting down into the dark tunnels with each other. We're so good at it. I know this experientially when I am capsized in something, in parenting or in work or in relationships with my parents. My friends are excavators coming down to get me and, grabbing you by the ... I know that this is our magic, that this is the power of women in relationship with each other. And I just thought, what a powerful thing to go back and reflect on, that we started the year talking about authenticity. We're ending the year talking about how we need to continue to work on those things and those real struggles so that we can really, do what God intended us to do and live in a great community with each other. So we are going to talk just a little bit about this really tough topic of judgment. I think judgment is not a really hard thing for us to wrap our heads around as Christians, because in good and bad ways, we're pretty good at being known for being judgy, right? Maybe not always in ways that God actually intended. But Matthew does say just really clearly, do not judge others and do not be judged. This is Billy Graham. And when I got this picture, did anyone else take a minute and look and be like, is that Pastor Mike? Yeah. Am I the first person that's ever realized how much he looks like Billy Graham? I had no idea until I saw that picture. But it's God's job to judge, and it's my job to love, he says. And of course, Mother Teresa, and I love this one too, is if you judge people, you have no time to love them, which is great. So I think it's pretty easy, again, wrap our heads around the fact that we really, judgment is not something the Bible is super fans of. And also I think that, when we think about things that hurt us in our relationships, another word that just, sometimes the judgment word is tough, and also betrayal. Has anyone here been hurt by a friend? A girlfriend, a family member, a sister, right? Probably everyone. And so, even in Timothy, there's a warning here for us about, people who betray their friends. And if you're reckless or you're prideful, focusing on, loving pleasure, those are the things that keep us away from those godly relationships and godly relationship with God. And so, it's pretty clear. The Bible says not to judge because, for one thing, it's God's job, not ours. It exposes our sin, I think, is another big part of that. It exposes, things like envy, resentment, pride. And I've heard this before, but I saw it again, and I just thought, this is really very true, is a lot of times the things that I find myself judging about other people are often the things I dislike the most about myself. And I think that's also really powerful. And lastly, like we've been saying, it keeps us from living in a rich relationship with each other. So, I think that when we think about judgment, right, what are some of the common patterns and stereotypes that we see in modern life, right? One of the ones that I sometimes see or personally experience is the push-pull between women in a family stage of life, but maybe not, even, if you've already raised your kids or not, women who work full-time and women who work part-time, work at home, work in different ways, right? There's a push-pull to that. Women that work outside of the home maybe sometimes feel that would be me, feel like we're getting pulled away from our kids and our family and our ability to focus on things. And I think on the flip side, and I can't speak for all of you in this room, but I know there's some of you that I think there's a feeling too of, am I not doing enough to support my family? Am I not living into the calling and the gifts that God gave me or the education that I have, right? And so those are all, common things. Sometimes we have a younger generation, versus an older generation, whether that's your family members, sisters, or friends that, kind of come from different eras, because we grow up with different life experiences. We grow up with different experience with technology. Some of us have a different amount of material blessings, and that's hard to kind of see. Some people are really open with their struggles. They're ready to talk about them. And some of us, sometimes sometimes we judge people just because how open they are and how much they put on social media, right? Or we have divorce, or we have relationship struggles, or we have challenges with our parents or children. And we see these things. And I don't think that we really, mean to, but I think it is really easy to jump into judgment, and sometimes in judgment, a lot of these things we feel a sense of, really the word I'd use is resentment. So last year, if you remember, I also brought a quote from a woman named Brene Brown, who's just someone that I read a lot of her stuff and admire, and she's a Christian woman, also a prolific writer and speaker. So we're going to play a quick clip from her just about that topic of resentment, just for a minute. Oh, and I have to click again. Thank you.
So I thought resentment was from the anger family, right? Because when we're resentful, we seem kind of bitter and angry. So I'm doing a podcast interview with Mark Rackett, who heads up an emotions research center at Yale. And we're getting ready to go on the air live. And I say, hey, let me ask you just a quick personal question from my own therapy. Resentment is in the anger family, right? And he goes, no, Resentment's a function of envy. And it completely changed my life. Because now, instead of looking at someone and saying, hey, look, I'm working 60 hours a week. Why aren't, I'm so resentful. Why aren't you? I'm thinking, oh, they're taking the weekend off. I'm not mad because you're not working. I'm mad because I'm not taking the weekend off. I'm not mad because there's stuff, well, I'm a little bit mad about the sink and the counter, but I'm mad because why can't I enjoy myself in my house if everything's not perfect? And so there's a knife up against my throat, but I'm
holding it, is what she says before it cuts off. So that was a little clip where she's talking about this book, Atlas of the Heart, where she actually is just going through and naming emotions, because she's found that most of us don't have words for all of our feelings, and that by doing that is actually a really healthy form of healing. And I love this quote from her book, The Gifts of Imperfections, and it would hopped out to me right away again when she's talking about connection, right? Friendship, connection. She says, connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. That sounds biblical to me. It sounds biblical to me. And so I thought about that and how that expresses itself in my own life. So just a couple fun quick stories. Here's lovely Katie and her husband, Justin, who I did ask Katie if I could do this. But I remembered seeing this wonderful post, which is really beautiful. Her husband is just talking about their relationship and how amazing and wonderful Katie is, which I can attest to. But I will also admit, the first time I saw it, I was like, my husband doesn't say that stuff about me ever. And that's just not his style, which is totally fine. If he ever sees this, he'll be like, yeah, good luck with that, dear. I love you, but no. But that's not who my husband is. But I had that moment of envy. And then I remembered, because I know Katie and I know who she is. She's also been really open with the fact that she has struggled with that. Her little son, Alex, has been really sick this year, and she needed our prayers, and he needed our prayers. And she's just a beautiful example of a wonderful woman, but yet, again, it's so easy to judge. But I would say on the flip side, right, it's really easy to reframe that and think about how much we love Katie, think about how special she is in those gifts that she has. So I could keep going on a little bit about judgment, because, again, I don't really think that there's any question that we know that it's bad. But I love this little provocation from Lisa Turkhurst, who's a Christian writer. She says, how differently might our lives be if women didn't have to fear the harsh criticisms of other women? Might we be willing to step out a little bolder for Jesus? Might we be willing to be a little more vulnerable? Might we live our lives a little less guarded, right? And so she talks about that same point again, that, we sometimes are noticing the things we have the area to sin in, which is helpful, I think, if we're trying to catch ourselves in that moment and flip our mindset. and, making sure that we're not kind of elevating ourselves over others in a way, that really is sin. And so, it can look like pride and it can look like a bunch of other things. So a personal story that comes up, I thought this was fun. This is my wedding. We're celebrating 15 years this year. Thank God, literally, for a man and a relationship that put up with me and that we've, been together this long and love him dearly. But I have a story about one of the women. I'm not going to tell you who it is because, things get on the internet and whatever, who's a really good friend of mine. We went to high school together, and we actually, we weren't in the same friend group. She was cooler than I was. So, but we hung out, and we did some of the same activities, and then, lo and behold, come college, we ended up in the same sorority. And that's when we really became really good friends. And I will tell you, she is just such a cool person. We bonded over the fact that we did actually have some shared experiences because, that switch from high school to college, I know some of you are about to have kids go through right now. I remember that experience being very much trying to find yourself again. And she and I at least had some common frame of reference and things that, things that were similar that we could bond over, but also kind of keep becoming ourselves in a way that we wanted to in college. And so we had a ton of fun together. I will say she was my one friend that I could usually count on and being all in for Halloween. We are getting dressed up. We are going out. We both love Halloween. She just always was really excited to plan events. She is a professional event planner. And, she was really special to me, and that friendship was wonderful. But I think because we grew up together, because we have some of the same friends, because our parents still kind of have the same friend group, there was always this comparison thing that neither of us really wanted to acknowledge. But it was definitely there, and I think it hurt our relationship a little bit. And what ended up happening with this friendship is I had moved away after getting married in college, and she stayed in Nebraska. And, we would always try to catch up with each other whenever we can. And so I had driven 18 hours from Ohio after, working so hard. I had, an eye twitch from screens, I still remember, and I was so tired, but we were going to meet up that night. So I got there, and I got ready, and I was all ready to go out, and I kept calling her phone, where are we meeting? Where are we meeting? What are we going to do? And she didn't ever answer her phone. And then I got a voicemail the next day that said, sorry, I ended up needing to stay in with my family, something like that. And I remember in my head, I had all sorts of judgment about that. She just didn't want it. She didn't want to not be cute. And it was going to take too long to get ready. And this whole fear of comparison thing in a little town, which those of you that grew up in little towns know is absolutely real. And so I had always had this sense of resentment about kind of what I thought was the story about our friendship. And so what I decided, I felt like our friendship was always really one-sided. And so I just told myself, you know what? I'm just going to let her be the one that makes the next phone call. I'm going to stop feeling like it's not fair to me that that the friendship is not reciprocated, right? That I'm giving more to the friendship than I felt like I was receiving at that time for whatever reason. We've never spoken again. I've never talked to her since that moment. It was over 10 years ago. She was in my wedding, and she was really special to me. And I know that she tried. I know she kind of reached out online here or there. I think she actually maybe sent me a Starbucks e-gift card for my birthday 5 years ago. Neither of us have known how to get past that moment. It is still something that God has put on my heart that I need to resolve. And I would bet a lot of you have stories like that too. And maybe those stories are not even just about a friend, but a sister, or a mom, someone where you just haven't been able to resolve that thing. And I tell you that story that it's still not healed, and I'm still praying about what to do about that thing, right? And so I share that again just because I think it's one of those things, that ideas that I had, the judgment, the comparison that we had, I think is one of those things that broke something that was really special to me. And I followed her life journey, and I wish her so well. She got married recently, and I just wish, gosh, I should have been there. So, if you see this online later, call me. My number has not changed. You never know how God works. But I do want to talk to you just a little bit also now about kind of women in the Bible and the models that we can see. I love the fact that in the Bible, very often women are in groups or famous pairs. So think about Sarah and Hagar, Mary and Martha, Leah and Rachel, Mary and Elizabeth. I love that they were like so important in the Gospels, and like they're cousins, and like at one point Mary goes and like lives with Elizabeth for 3 months, and like they're pregnant together. Like how cute is that? Deborah and Jael, Lois and Eunice, who's the mother and grandmother of Timothy. But Mary and Martha are two that I think that we know their story really well, and we've talked about that before. But really, when I was studying for this and looking at this example of Mary and Martha, I thought friendship, sisterhood is not what I think of when I think of the relationship that I imagine the two of them have. But I wanted you to just take a minute, and I picked a couple pictures that seemed really realistic to me here, kind of about Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Because I think they're well known, but I think the story is more hidden than we want. So I want to just remind you of a couple of things that even when we've been reading through the book of John here, if you're following along with our whole Holy Bible over the year, I caught even a couple of things in John that I wouldn't have seen before. One of which is that in John at one point, when Lazarus has died, it actually says specifically that Lazarus, their brother, Mary and Martha, are all really good friends, that they were very dear to Jesus. And you think about in the Bible, we have the apostles, but you know that Jesus had his crew, right? And I think of them, you think about moments when Jesus said, everybody who follows in faith they are my sisters and brothers, right? And so I'm imagining that they're like some of, if you've got aunts if you've got cousins, or you've got kids in your neighborhood that are really close, maybe they grew up together, right? As they were traveling. And so I think about this, these brother and two sisters, and then also the thing that I think that we know the most about Martha is she's one of the few people in the Bible that bosses Jesus a little bit. She's like a quintessential bossy woman. But I also noticed, I thought it was really interesting, we know there's a man in the home. We know that Lazarus is part of their family. But Martha is the one who welcomed him. So we know that she's a strong woman. We know that she is strong enough to boss Jesus, one of the few people in the Bible, that she clearly is sort of more of a matriarch type of figure. And, the thing that we hear about Martha, about her fussing too much, I think is kind of interesting, because I think we think of it as which is probably fair, right? I'm doing all the work, my sister's not doing the work, make her do her chores, Jesus. But I think there's actually a couple of things that's interesting is in the society, the challenge was not just that she wanted help in the kitchen. The challenge was that Mary was taking a position of being a student to a rabbi. That is the position in society. That is how people became teachers and rabbis, which women did not do. So, number one, she was working in that society. It would be seen as inappropriate because she could not proclaim the gospel. She could not learn to be a rabbi. So, fear of judgment around appearances and societal norms was actually a really big thing. And she was sitting that would be only done in the man's part of a home. In that community, there's typically a women's area and a men's area where Jesus would have been. And so I thought again about that of gosh, these are two wonderful women in the Bible who are sisters. And yet one sister's fear of judgment and the societal standards are also keeping Mary from living into her calling. And even later, we find out that later when Lazarus has died, Martha's the one who runs out to Jesus, and she talks to him again, that strong character. And she tells Jesus that Lazarus has died. I love this part that it actually made in the Bible when Jesus is going to go raise Lazarus from the dead. And she's like, it's going to smell. That is what it says, is that it's going to smell, because he's been in the tomb for 4 days. And I love this picture of her. But later on, Martha is also the first woman who kind of sees the error of her ways, and she tells Jesus, I believe that you're God, and you can raise my brother from the dead. And then eventually, now there's sort of contention around this. Mary is, in some versions of the gospel, the woman who came and anointed Jesus before his death, which, again, if you know more about the society, it wasn't just that she did that or a woman did that, but the fact that a woman did something that was reserved for priests, for ministers, for rabbis. So she was living into her calling, but she and her sister had to go through that and had to actually go walk through that together. And now they're, probably two of the most famous, I think, sister pairs, right, in the Bible. So I love that story helps tell us a little bit about, coming through that. But they had to sort of confess it, right? They had to kind of confess their sins, or at least Martha did, to kind of move past that, allow her sister to live into her calling too. So I really love that. So before we move on to the other story, I'll tell you one other personal thing that kind of happened to me throughout this year. This year was harder for me than last year, just on a personal, professional front. And so some of you know a little bit about this, but it's personal, so I haven't shared with everybody. I'm certainly not going to share it recorded on YouTube later. But I had to make some decisions about my health, about things that were sort of had caused challenges in my relationship. And I really was worried. Finally, I realized I was worried about how other people would see, for the people that knew about this choice and this decision that I made, how other people would see it, that somehow the decision I made for myself would be reflected on other women, like I thought they needed to do the same thing I did, or something like that. And I was at church thinking about it, and I prayed about it, and I prayed about it, and I prayed about it so much. And I came up to the front just to talk to Joy and Elian. And Joy and Elian, like I'm kind of on staff here, and so I know them, but not really well. Just like probably a lot of you know each other here. You might talk to each other here, but you don't necessarily, know everybody's everyday story. And they asked how I was doing, and they kind of knew because I had messaged everybody that I would be out for a while. From other things. And, I just kind of confessed it. I just kind of told them the truth. I was like, I'm really worried that people are going to think this thing, specifically women like you guys that don't necessarily know the whole story, I'm not going to share it, are going to really judge me. And you know what they said to me? They just said, they were encouraging. They were supportive. They were accepting. And even though they were like both kind of like, yeah, it's not really on our radar, the way that they accepted me and the way that they asked, we're going to pray for you through this thing. They both texted me. They both called me. And I felt so seen. And I felt so just, again, accepted for who I am. And I thought, that is such a good model. That's just really sometimes what we need, right? And we have that opportunity to come alongside, maybe not even necessarily people that today we would call our closest friends, but women we know and trust in community are really important. So that was just another way that I, sort of felt like God was calling to this topic. So we're going to talk just a little bit more about my one other favorite story. And I will tell you, I have loved the book of Ruth since I was a little girl. What my mom's rule was that I was allowed to read in church if it was the Bible, because I loved to read so much. I would bring my little books and stuff, because I grew up Catholic, and mass can get long. But if it was the Bible, it was okay. And so I found myself drawn to like strong female characters, Esther, Ruth. And I think that I loved Ruth as a little girl because it's a love story. That's what a lot of us, again, kind of get out of Ruth at the first is, there's a big love story in Ruth. But we want to talk a little bit more about the historical context, again, of what was going on here. So first, Ruth is Naomi's daughter-in-law. And so in a time of famine, Israelites had to flee because it was just, Israelites went through a lot throughout the Bible, consistent theme, but at this specific time, they had to flee to Moab. And Moab was like really not a great place. Like in the Bible, it talks about Canaanites. Moabites were like even worse on the spectrum. So they were descendants of Lot and his incestuous relationship with his daughter. There was lots of pagan practices, pagan worship, very risque sort of sexual practices and things like that. Like they weren't super great. So it would have been seen at that time as not great for a Jewish family to have to go live in this. And eventually the sons married Moabite women. Ruth was a Moabite woman. And so eventually it was, again, a time of famine. And the two brothers passed away. And so Naomi decides that she's going to return to Israel. And she says to Ruth and Orpah, her other daughter-in-law, leave me alone. Don't, there's nothing here left. I don't have any more sons for you to marry. Very much like Job, Naomi was just crying out and just saying, I'm broken. I'm done. I'm old. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I'm going to go back home. But I want you to stay here with your families. And Ruth was the one that, turned around and she just said, don't force me to leave you. Don't make me go home. Where you go, I will go. And where you live, I'll live. Your people are my people. And this part is really important. She says, your God is my God. She was a Moabite. They believed in multiple deities, but she had accepted God through the model of Naomi. So really, by being part of Naomi's family, Naomi had already brought her to God, to believe in the one true God. And so she goes on to say, where you die, you'll die, and that's where we'll be buried. Not even death itself is going to come between us. So they leave, and they go back. And as the story goes on, the part that I think a lot of us know is just that they continue on. And she, I'll go back one second. So they continue on, and they go back, and the story is, that it's an older and a younger woman again. So Naomi's wise. And yes, they're relatives, but I would say I bet they were friends, right? So Naomi's very wise. And Ruth she's strong. So she goes out and she gathers. She uses her strength basically to do what was allowed in that society to help her support herself. She gathers wheat so they can make bread and they can survive. And so, they both have suffered this devastating loss of their son, husband. And yet there are these things where they were able to play off each other's strengths despite their age differences, despite their cultural differences. They used the strengths that they had, Naomi's wisdom, again, her knowledge of the cultural practices of the time. And Ruth was able to support them so that they could survive. And I thought, gosh, how often do family problems come up because someone that's maybe part of the family by marriage, or you hear this from your friends about their relationships with their in-laws. There's a cultural difference, or there's a difference in opinions about holidays, and you feel judged. At one point, I think that within my own family, I realized that my own in-laws, I realized that they thought I was fancy. I'm like, I'm not fancy. I was born in western Nebraska. Like, I own cowboy boots. What's that fancy? But it's just like, different opinions about things. I think those types of like differences in families and are so common. So yes, they were families, but I think they were also friends, and they stuck by each other. And so as the story goes on, Naomi is wise. And so big part of the story was her understanding of the biblical tradition of the cultural tradition of how land and inheritances are passed. They're not allowed to be sold in that society, but land can be leased throughout time. So as part of this whole story, what really worked was that Naomi helped give Ruth some good advice that positioned Boaz, who became her husband, to eventually kind of walk through the societal process of being able to be her protector. There was another family member who was closer to sort of the lineage that would have had kind of first right of refusal over not just Ruth, but the land that would be in Naomi's family's land that he would inherit. And so, again, because Naomi kind of knows how this is going to go, and she has that wisdom. Like, don't you love older women's wisdom? Like, he likes you. You know he likes you. I'm like, no, he doesn't. I just think of them as sort of friends, that sort of relationship. And based on their shared faith, based on their shared reliance on each other and the Lord, what that beautiful thing results in is this last part, which I think is really fun and a part of the end of the story that until I sat down and read it again, I kind of love. So Naomi has had this, this whole story. We focus so much on Ruth getting married and she gets to have a baby and it's so wonderful. I thought, but what about Naomi? And so the women in the town just say, blessed be to God. He didn't leave you without family to carry on your life. And so maybe this baby grew up to be famous in Israel. And so it just talks about how Naomi was a grandmother. I was like, there's probably not really a ton in the Bible about what it looks like to be a grandmother that's still super real today. She held him in his arms, cuddling him, cooing over him, waiting on him hand and foot. They even started to call him Naomi's baby boy. And as the story goes, that these became part of the lineage of King David and eventually of Jesus, the forefathers of Jesus. And I thought it came from two strong women who stood together, who shared their faith despite their differences. That came from very different cultures, different ages. I'm sure they were friends, and I think they're such great examples. So in closing, I wanted to just think about how are ways that we can live like our spiritual mothers in the Bible. This is my list. You might have a different list. This is probably my own checklist for myself, as much as it's from you, and you might have other ones. But I think they're good reminders. So, checking ourselves when we judge, and checking each other when we judge, and when we don't mean to, and we hear something that someone says or hear our internal monologue, and also giving ourselves grace, because remember, that is the thing that often we're judging the most about ourselves. So go easy on yourself and your sisters. Making time for each other, being there when it counts. Joy and Elion were there for me. Several of you in this room were there for me, checking in on me. In a moment that it counted, when I honestly hadn't even told some of my dearest friends because it just was like an awkward thing to bring up. And so being there when it counts, I think, matters. And serving each other with joy. The same instance, I ended up having to tell some of my girlfriends later on. They asked what they could do. I was like, actually, could you guys bring my family dinner? And because I wasn't anticipating how hard this thing was going to be on my body, how much help I would need with my family. And so I just was like, well, I had to ask. And so I was so honored by the fact that my friends served me with joy. And I know some of you do those things you bring each other's coffee, you carpool with each other's kids, you run the thing from the neighborhood that the dad throws you through the window for the kid that forgot. You meet up for coffee when someone's starting their retirement, doesn't know what their life is going to look like, or when that grandkid is having a really hard time, but grandma's voice is not in the room at this moment, right? I see you out there doing those things. So look out for her people. Help her love them well. Assume positive intent. Like, that's a phrase we use around my work and other places, but I always have to remind myself to just avoid repeating things that I may not know are the truth, even if it's just, I feel like I'm telling a story or being funny. And sitting with each other in our pain and our sorrow. Sometimes that's what we really need, right? We don't necessarily need answers. We just need to be there for each other and ultimately pray for each other, because those are the things that God has called us to do. And what we want, right, is we want relationships that bear good fruit. So as you're thinking about your relationships, maybe with a mom, a sister, really good friends, ask yourself, is how we're living and interacting with each other, is it bearing good fruit? Is it godly? Or is there something I need to change or look inside so that I can surround myself with loving women and loving relationships, because that's what you all deserve. That's what we all deserve. That's what God designed us for, is to live in community so we can be there for each other. So with that, I would love to close our year of ministry, hopefully leaving you with a sense that you're not alone and that you're part of a community, that you're loved, certainly here, if nowhere else, because that's why women's ministry exists. So I'm going to ask Christine to come up and close us with a fun activity. We decided to leave this for kind of our response time at the end. We could probably play some music under this if we really wanted to, Max, since we're really audibling this. But Christine is going to lead us through our last little activity of the year.
Okay, so you should have received one of these sheets when you came in and a pen, but does anyone need a pen or a sheet? Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do, maybe, I don't know, has anyone ever done stand up for your sister before? Okay, good one. So I think it's super powerful, and I think it's a beautiful way for us to end our theme that we've had this year of real faith for real life. And it ties so beautifully into Crystal's message tonight about friendship and the importance of what does it look like to stand with and for our sisters in Christ, and how we can do that. And so on your sheet, you're going to see a number of statements from top down to bottom. And so I'm going to give you a minute or two to go through the statements. I'll probably have you even just like spread out from your neighbors a little bit, because this is an opportunity for you to maybe take a step in authenticity and vulnerability. But some of these statements are like really big statements. Some of them may be things about you that other people know, and because you've shared them before. Some of these may be statements about you that you have never shared with anyone before. And so while I want for you to have the opportunity to take a step into authenticity and vulnerability, I also realize it could be like a big step. So I want to encourage you just to spread out from your neighbor when we do this exercise, so that you really have a sense that you can do this in anonymity, because you're not going to write your name on your sheet. So if you already did that and need a new sheet, we've got plenty and we can get those to you. You're not going to write your name in your sheet, but I will ask for you to go through the statements and answer authentically, and just make like a mark of some sort. Like, it can be a dot, it can be a little circle, it can be an X next to statements that are true for you. And again, no one is going to know whose sheet yours is. It's going to be totally anonymous. So you have the anonymity to be able to answer really authentically and vulnerably. And then what we're going to do is we're going to collect the sheets, and then we're going to mix them all up, and then we're going to redistribute the sheets. And so now you're going to have someone else's sheet. And then I'm going to walk through and I'm going to read each of these statements. And if your sheet, not your answer that you filled out that now someone else has, but your sheet that you're holding then at the time in your hand has some sort of mark next to that statement, you're going to stand up. And you're essentially standing up for your sister who has experienced this in their own lives, and you're standing with them. And I think what's going to be amazing for us as we go through, even with the small group as we have tonight, is that we're going to experience others standing with us, even though we know, like, someone else is standing up maybe for me in this thing, but I'm also standing up for someone else. And now we realize, like, we're not alone with some of the different things that we've gone through. And so we get to demonstrate to one another tonight that even within this community, that we have people who have walked a journey similar to ours, and that we aren't alone in the things that we've experienced, that we've gone through, and that we're willing to stand up for one another and be authentic and be real and be supportive, so that we would know that we're not alone. So spread out. I'm going to give you a few minutes to fill out your sheets, and then my greeters, we'll pass them. You're going to fold it in half. So once you're done, fold it like this. So everybody's folded the same way. Fold it in half like this. And then we're going to pass them to the middle. And then we'll start gathering them. And so we'll just wait, and that way we'll pass them all at the same time, and then we'll shuffle them, and then we'll redistribute. Okay? Okay, so if you're done filling out your form, we'll just kind of pass them into the middle. Katie's been gathering them up. Then our greeters are going to do a quick little shuffle it up for us. I have a story to share while they're doing that, just to give you a little lighthearted moment. I was going to share this earlier when Crystal was bringing up karaoke. Okay, so when I was in my mid-20s, I was involved in ministry, and one summer I spent in Vietnam teaching English. So, and there were karaoke bars everywhere in Hanoi where we were, okay, in Vietnam. So I was hanging out with some of my Vietnamese friends that I'd made, and I'd said to them, we should go do karaoke. And they were like, what? What? I don't know. Like, they did not know what I was talking about. And I was like, karaoke, it would be so great. We could go, and then we could go do, like, karaoke. And they were like, we don't know. We don't, like, they're trying to figure out the English for it or whatever. And so then I start moving into, like, this, as all people, when there's a language barrier, you start moving into charades, right? So I'm, like, miming like a microphone, like, like I'm singing or whatever. And they go, oh, karaoke. And I was like, karaoke and karaoke, like, that is not that different. What? Why were we having problems with this understanding? Okay, that was my story about karaoke, or karaoke. They also, this is something that I had to just learn being there, because as you can imagine, the Vietnamese people, not a big people, not a large people. I was like head and shoulders taller than all of the women and most of the men. And also just bigger boned. They're like tiny people. And so I felt like an Amazon princess the entire time that I was there. But I remember one time that I was saying goodbye to my friends. We'd been hanging out, and I was like giving them a hug and leaving. And they were like, they just held on to me, and then they looked at me, and then they go, oh, Christine, if only we could be fatter like you. And I was like, if only. And they were totally meaning it as a compliment, because if you are like, fatter, then that means you have a lot of money, because you can eat really well. So they meant it totally as a compliment. And I totally took it that way. Ish. I mean, I'm still talking about it 30 years later. So anyway, okay. So first of all, thank you so much for the gift of your vulnerability for this exercise. It's not easy to do, but I appreciate that. So you should have now a sheet in front of you. Hopefully it's not your own sheet, but you should have a sheet in front of you, and I'm going to read a statement. And if the person whose sheet you have has marked that statement, then you'll stand. And we're just going to have a moment where we're going to acknowledge, like, okay, like, that's a big thing. And you know what? I'm guessing there's going to be multiple people stand for mostly probably all of them. But you know what? Even if there's just one, I want you to know that we stand with you as the person standing representing, or the person who marked it, and you know that it's your sheet. I just want you to know we stand with you no matter what. So I'm sitting because that way I can stand with my sheet or whatever. So I'm just going to go through them. And if it's marked on your sheet, then stand. I have suffered from depression. Okay, you can sit. I have self-medicated, maybe alcohol, drugs, food, pornography, shopping as a way to cope. You can sit. I hate getting older. You can sit. I have questioned God's plan. Yeah. Have a seat. I have battled infertility. I have hated the way I look. Okay. I have or am currently struggling with comparison. I have had sex with someone I didn't love as a way to feel loved. I have suffered from anxiety. I have struggled in my friendships and finding a community. I'm glad you're here. I have lost a child or spouse or parent. I have intentionally cut or harmed myself. I have been sexually abused. I think I am a bad mother. I have been cheated on by a partner. I have cheated on a partner. I have struggled with feelings of guilt from past sin. And I have struggled with negative self-talk. All right, I'm just going to have everybody stand now. And I'm just going to close in prayer. God, I thank you for the women who are in this room, for their stories, for the journey that they have walked. Lord, for the things that are on this sheet that represent part of that journey, and Lord, maybe things that are part of their journey that aren't even listed here, but you know are significant in forming who they are and who they stand right here today being. And God, I thank you that you are a God of infinite plan A's. And God, that times maybe in our lives that we may feel like this was plan A, and then things have gotten messed up, and now I'm on plan B and plan C, and gosh, how many plans am I on now, God? And he says that I work all things together for the good, for those who love me and who are called according to my purposes. So God, everything is plan A because you take those things in our lives. Not that you caused, the things that you still grieve with us, but you take those and you make beauty out of ashes. So God, thank you that we can be authentic and we can be vulnerable, that we can then stand with one another in those experiences to know, God, that we're not alone. Lord, that we can then be part of community that values vulnerability and authenticity. And so, God, I pray for these women today that they would find in this place that community that they long for and want, and that you're offering to them. And God, I pray that they might walk forward from this moment with the comfort of knowing, God, that they're not alone in their story. And God, that you take their story and you work it for good. And God, it may be their story and those things that have happened in their lives that you want to use to connect them to someone else. And then to be able to share with that person the depth of your love, or the depth of your comfort, or the depth of your redemption, or the depth, Lord, of the acceptance that we find in you. So I thank you so much for that. I thank you that we're women. I thank you that you created us that way so that we have connection with one another. And I thank you for this place and this ministry year where it's been all about real faith for the real life stuff, like the things on this sheet that we faced. And thank you, God, that it's not just real life or real problems, but that there's real faith. There's real Jesus. There's real love that you offer, and the power to walk in wholeness and healing that you give to us. I'm so grateful for that, God, and grateful for these women. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we're wrapping it up. There's plenty of Build Your Own May basket stuff in the back. There are stickers if you have one of these special mugs, and you can go and find some stickers for that. And do not forget June 29th, which is our men's and women's patio night. And invite all of the people that you know, all the women and all the men. And they're welcome to come to that. So, and bring a lawn chair. Yes, thank you. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. We love you. And look for more information on our Facebook and social media, Instagram, as far as details for things coming up in the future.